Welcome to the Cabin Culture Podcast, where we spend a little more time diving deeper into all the fun parts of cabin culture. I like to think of this as both the material and imagined expressions of how cabin lovers, dwellers, builders, and designers wish to live a more simple and authentic life. I'm Janice, the human behind Cozy Rock Cabin, and each week we explore the stories, insights, and inspirations from others in the cabin community. Today we'll be chatting with Sheena, the creative mind behind Cle Elum Cabin out west in Washington State. And I'm especially excited because we're exploring some interesting topics around creating immersive and nostalgic cabin experiences. Sheena has a rich background in event planning and design, and she brings that unique touch to every aspect of her cabin. Her expertise in creating spaces that are both functional and deeply personal is truly inspiring and helping us to create something that you don't see every day. We'll hear about the creative decisions she made, the challenges she faced with others not seeing or trusting her vision, and the rewarding moments that made it all worthwhile. Sheena will also share valuable insights on social media strategies, thrifting to furnish a cabin, and the unique perspective of event design in interior decorating. Whether you're dreaming of your own cabin, in the midst of building one, or simply love hearing about these charming getaways, you are in the right place. Let's do it. I am selfishly, this episode is going to be really basically just for me, but I think lots of other people are going to benefit too.
Perfect.
Because my future dream cabin, I've talked about it on the podcast before, so lots of people know, is called Dead Grandma's Cabin.
And I already love it.
Really, yes. You described an immersive experience versus a nicely decorated home. And that's what I want Dead Grandma's Cabin to be, is like by the end of your stay there, you're like, man, this is like my new adopted grandma. Like I understand her. I have a feel for her life. I want it to be fully thrifted. And Sheena, your cabin, when I first found it, I was like, okay, this is obviously like a newer, nicer version, but like, this is what I'm picturing.
Yeah, no, thank you. The challenge was it's a new build, which is great, but I also wanted to make it look old or try to. And the amount of I'd not pushback, but a lot of doubt came from my builders when I would make certain requests. The direction of the wood planking, I got pushback, and I was like, first of all, I'm paying the bills, so I feel like I get to like say how I want the wood to go. But second, like they were just trying to talk me out of things. Well, I don't think that'll look good. I'm like, I know what I'm chasing. Please, I was like, I want rock behind the stovepipe, the fire, the fireplace, but I want it to look like it's from a 70s cabin. So like I had to find places that, outdated materials, out of style, out of trend materials. And I kept getting puzzling looks. And I was like, you guys, I know what I'm doing.
First of all, you're builders, you're not designers. Second of all, trust me. But I think your experience is not unusual. I hear that all the time, even if it's modern looks. For the people who, in my opinion, have built the coolest cabins, they have a vision for something that is different.
Yeah.
And builders are often used to creating the same thing or following trends or what do I see most often, rather than having innovative, creative visions and bringing them to life. And that's where I think it's really cool to find a cabin owner who's like, nope, I'm doing something different.
Yeah, it annoyed me. The pushback annoyed me.
But here you are proving them all wrong. And I also think what's fascinating to me about yours is that most people who have vintage inspired cabins, because I've seen a handful on Instagram, not nearly enough in my opinion, but a handful.
Yeah.
And usually it's people with old cabins who are either forced into doing that because there are certain design changes that would cost too much to change.
Right.
Or they just have a vision. And so they bought an old cabin because they're like, it has that energy to it and I want to keep that.
Yeah.
But I don't know that I've seen it in a new build, which was what really struck me, is that yours has that polish of being new and fresh, but the feel of being, and you even describe it as 70s and 80s themed, which the amount of people doing 80s themed cabins, literally zero. I've seen none.
Yeah.
That is such a unique, design period to bring back. What I guess take us back to what inspires you about those two decades and why you chose 70s and 80s.
Yeah, I think so Pacific Northwest, first of all, I like cabin culture, diving into cabin aesthetic. I'm so in love with the Catskills, which is just East Coast cabin stuff.
Mhm.
But it's different. And I remember being like, I can't build a Catskills cabin like we're on the West Coast, and like we have a different aesthetic here and a different landscape and whatever. But I was just inspired by like that summer camp energy, wet hot American summer. I love comedy, I love humor, I love that kind of thing. And so I was like, I want it to feel a little like tongue in cheek, and a little bit like there's little jokes and things scattered throughout the house. I want it to feel kind of like people are in on a bit of a joke, but also like I take this place very seriously.
Yeah,
So I
that's
love
fair.
I love that vibe. I love what hot American summer. Like I would keep going to photos of that, and like what were the campers wearing, and which I know isn't an old movie, but obviously it was vintage. Like this
Yeah.
is it's
Yeah.
the time period. Um, and just Googling summer camp photos, summer camp, summer camp. And I would put 70s and 80s. I was just chasing these kids with the popsicle covered faces and the pulled up socks. And I was like, that's the energy that I want. So then once I kind of like, fell in love with that sort of nostalgia, and, everything's rose colored glasses when we look back into time. So it just felt very homey and nostalgic and very analog, like nothing's digital about that
Yes.
time.
Yes.
And I want,
Which is kind of ironic because you have a lot of experience in social media as well,
right.
which we'll talk about
Yeah.
later.
Yeah. I wanted something that felt very anti-techy.
Mhm.
Even down to the choice of our picture, like our TV is a Samsung frame, because I wanted it to look like art on the wall. I didn't want it to be like there's a
Mhm.
TV in the room, but we also like
Mhm.
want modern amenities, and we want to have movie night and stuff like that.
Right.
So that was just, I think I've always just been drawn to that. And then I would say in 2020, I launched kind of by accident. It's kind of a COVID sort of situation where I was doing a lot of thrifting and kind of finding unique, eclectic touches for my home. My full-time home is not decorated in this theme at all, but I love mixing old pieces with new pieces. I just love
Mhm.
crossing decades with decor.
Mhm.
So I was doing all this thrifting, and then my house got decorated, but I didn't want to stop thrifting. So I turned it into like a thrifting resale business. So for the next 2 years, just estate sales. And the more stuff you see, the more it shapes your taste, your style. It's funny. I was just at an antique mall yesterday, and things that I would have gushed about 2 years ago, I'm kind of over now. I'm like, nah, okay, I've seen
Yep.
that. I've moved on. But
Yep.
I just did a lot of
Yep.
estate sales, thrifting, and you're just starting to see a lot of old things and seeing the potential. And you throw that in with a new like West Elm chair, but then you've got like something that's legitimately a little bit beat up from the 70s next to
Yes.
it. I love
Yeah.
I love that. Um, so that's just kind of like, I think I've been drawn to. And when we talked about the cabin, I'm being a little wordy. I apologize. I'm trying to like when I
Mhm.
went to the cabin, the house that inspired me completely, where I was like, we are doing this. It was a smaller cabin. It's similar. We have not A-frame. We have a peaked window, like chalet style window wall. And we went to a very much smaller one with a spiral staircase and a loft upstairs, and they had a long stovepipe to the ceiling, and it was snowy. It was December. We watched a movie on a very little TV in a corner, and I'm sitting next to my kids, and we're all on the couches with blankets, and I'm like, no one's touched a device. No, we've been playing games all day. It was just that, again, that wholesome anti-tech. We are spending time together, and I looked at Jay and I was like, this is what we're doing someday. Like we're going to do this because I want to chase this feeling forever.
You described it in your pre-interview form as the antidote to overwhelm,
Yeah.
which I really liked. It made me like just reading that, I was like, oh, I want to go to the cabin right now. Cause that is exactly what it is. Like everyday life can be so overwhelming. So it's like,
Hmm.
what do I do when that happens?
Yeah.
Go to the cabin.
Yeah. It's funny. I walk in and I'll think, oh, why don't I just live here? But then I'm like, oh, but then we bring in our stuff with us. And I think why I like this place is because our stuff and our life is not here. And the second we start, and I don't live in a themed home full time. So this is a very themed home. And I was like, oh, it wouldn't be a retreat or a respite. I mean, it's beautiful, but it wouldn't feel like the way it feels if we were here all the time. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's just this
Someone
escape.
said that to me in DMs this week. I posted something about Airbnb versus VRBO, and they said we're really hesitant to stay at Airbnbs because apparently, I didn't know this, VRBOs cannot be a primary residence. So if you're going to rent it, you can't live there primarily. It has to be a second home.
Interesting.
Whereas Airbnbs you can, right?
Right.
And you find a fair amount of people who will vacate. If they might put the price so high that if they get a booking, they'll just go stay with family or whatever.
Right.
And what they were saying was, I don't like staying at those because there is inherent clutter. If you live
Right.
someplace, you can't help but clutter it up.
Yeah.
And I was reflecting on that a lot because we get a lot of positive feedback about our cabins. It's like, I love how not cluttered it is. And I always get a little
Yeah.
confused by that because I'm like, well, I mean, what would I don't know. Like, I just, that has always been a little bit confusing to me. And now I think that's it, is that you're used to your
We're
home
used to stuff
where
everywhere.
that's right.
Yeah.
And so when you go someplace that doesn't have that, it brings a sense of calm just by your surroundings,
Yeah. That
which to your
has
point, if you move there, you get the
Then
clutter.
you have the clutter. That has been the
Mhm.
challenge for me, decorating with vintage, decorating thrifted. It's a constant curation. You can't just pull up well, I guess you can pull up Etsy. I've done a lot of Etsy shopping when I need something really fast, like a paint by number. I'm like, but but vintage and old is kind of inherently like tchotchkes and little things, and it is
A
a
lot
short
of color.
lot of color, and it is short-term
Mhm.
rental though. And there's either breakage or just things to dust. And then also like things can start feeling it's the stuff again. And so I'm really trying to strike that balance of feeling like you've got these vignettes and these clusters, but then I have to like pump the brakes and stop and be like, okay, we're done buying things that go on shelves. Like I've put I've stopped myself right now. Now I'm only shopping for like wall art because I feel like there's always room for wall art. But that is an interesting like tension because it's very easy to just be like, oh, that's a cute vase, that's a cute, figurine, and then all of a sudden we're back to just having this overstuffed home.
I think that's a really good point about why not many people decorate with thrifting. Even like, I love thrifting and I love the look of vintage and would have done it at Cozy Rock, but the piece that got in the way is that one, interior design is not a strength of mine. So I have questions for you.
Okay.
But when you have things full of color and full of personality, which I feel like in the 70s, 80s, even 90s, we had more than now, where like if you go to Target, it's almost like pull all the personality out of it, make it white and beige. But for a newbie designer, it's much easier to pair those things together. Because
Yeah.
if they're all white, beige, gray, then you just assume anything I buy that I like can all go together. Whereas in vintage, it takes a lot more intentionality to put different pieces together.
Yeah.
Do you have any advice on that front for someone, say, like me, who
Yeah.
would love to do a cabin and that decor, but is really worried about
Yeah.
just throwing a bunch of stuff together?
Yeah, I do. you know, Part, I guess, advantage slash disadvantage because it took forever. We had 2 years, like from the moment we bought the land to when we got the keys in our hand was a 2 year process. So, and even before we bought the land, we were looking at pre-existing cabins in the area. So we did not start off by thinking we were going to build. So I have been decorating essentially and dreaming for 2.5 years. Um, so there's the gift of time, which allows you to be really slow and not feel rushed
Yeah.
and pick things that draw, that attract you. But that's what I'll say is I did this in my home. I do this in this home. If there is something that it gives me a physical reaction where I'm like, like I don't know how I'm going to use it. I don't even know where it's going to go, but like, whoa, that feels
I must have it.
great. I will buy it and figure it out later. And
Yeah.
often what that means is it becomes, in some cases, I'm like looking around our house right now. There's a mirror behind me or behind this camera that I got on OfferUp. It's the heaviest mirror I've ever carried in my entire life. It was on, it was like $30. I had no idea where to put it. I don't know what to do with it. I did not care. I was just like that. It's old, it's vintage, it's something. And so just chase, and a mirror is a kind of a safer choice. Mirrors are mirrors. There's more funky things around this house that are like, how are you going to use that? My husband has no design sensibility, and he has learned long ago just to let it go. He's like, I don't get it, but it always ends up looking good. So I was like, great.
That's the right answer.
Yeah,
Sean still tries to weigh in, and I'm like,
yeah,
no, like, I'm not that good at it, but I'm
yeah,
hiring people who are good at it and I'm
yeah.
better than you. So, like, no.
So I'll buy that piece and then I'll just decide to design around it. If it's a funky lamp, I'll be like, I don't know how this will fit in this room, but we're going to get it in the room and then we're going to tweak around it because and those things are the statement pieces. Those are the things people notice when they walk in. And it's the thing you obsess over. I buy the funkiest stuff. I have the weirdest screen chair in my house that I was so obsessed with the fabric. And I remember thinking, I don't even know what room this will go in. It's so bizarre, but it's like, it just, like called to my soul. And I was like, well, and it's this beautiful focal point in our living room that we just made happen because I want environments to create a feeling. I want emotion to be drawn. And so if I feel that feeling when I'm shopping, I just get it and I figure it out later. And interestingly enough, you're attracted to very similar things. You might think this is so bizarre, but if you just trust your instincts, you're going to realize all the stuff you keep buying does actually jive because it's the same instinct drawing you to these things. So a one-off lamp might look totally crazy, but you do that 10 different times and all of a sudden you all have all these pieces that actually really marry together really well. You just have to be brave enough to buy the weird things.
I think bravery is a big part of it. And I do think that we've kind of been like, oh, I don't know the right word, but like talked out of that bravery with current design trends where it just tells us that those things are like not what you want because it's not what you see everywhere. And so
Yeah,
you have to really be able to trust your gut, I
yeah,
think.
yeah.
And I think a lot of us lose that connection to what our gut is telling us. And I don't, and this will be interesting because I want to talk about social media as well. But like I think social media has done a lot of that.
Yeah,
Like when you have all these outside influences,
yeah,
then you're like, I don't even know where my voice is amidst all of this
right.
noise. So how do I reconnect to it?
Hmm.
Let me ask you a practical question.
Yeah.
I love this idea of buy whatever speaks to you and then find a place for it later. And you also had 2 years to build. Where do you store all of it? What did that look like from a practical side of both storage and also organization of knowing that I have all these things? What do I need to then buy to supplement those things to make sure I have all the things that I need? Like, how did you organize that process?
So my career background is event planning and design. So I will work with couples historically for at least 12 months, sometimes longer, doing this very process. There's a design component, and then you have to remember what decisions you've made 5 months ago. You have to track all this. So I kind of applied that skill set to this process. Practically speaking, storage wise, the people we bought this land from were preparing it for their own home build. So a little bit of work had already been done on the earth, which was great. And they had built a lovely shed on the property that for their own storage purposes. And so that shed like save the day. That shed, everything kind of, I would have big things like the couch shipped here to the mountains and sit in the shed. And we would just do runs. Anytime something would get delivered to the house, we would just once a month go up, dump it to the shed. So that was a huge thing because I did look into storage units and things like that, which gosh, get really expensive. So that was
That's what I did for my first cabin
it's
because I didn't have a
expensive.
basement. For our
Yeah,
second cabin, I had a basement
yeah,
that was luckily unfinished and
yeah.
it became like just a giant storage
Yeah,
unit.
and then we do have our full-time home has a detached two-car garage that's in addition to the actual garages attached to the house. So we were able to, I mean, we basically had our own storage unit. So we definitely had a unique situation where we just had a lot of places to shove stuff. Everybody would ask that, like, where is all this stuff? I was like, in sheds and garages. I mean, we had two sectionals that we were storing for a year and a half, which is
Right. But for
crazy.
folks who aren't that lucky, I do think storage units, I mean, we still have one. Oh my God, because we live in an old house with no closets.
Yeah,
And we keep saying we're going to clean it out. This is how they make all their money.
it
And
is.
we just have written it off as an extra expense on our life where we store things. But it is only like a little bit less than $100 a month. And so
Oh,
over
that's
the course
great.
of the build, let's say it's a year, that's like $1,200, which is not nothing. Don't get me wrong, but
Yeah. No, that's
is in the
amazing.
context of a build, not bad.
Okay, my units were like coming in at $800 a month, if not more.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, but I mean, it's probably more maybe Seattle pricing. So,
Yeah, and
and
probably a different size. Ours is really small, and
yeah,
Sean is just has it all packed up
yeah.
in all kinds of ways. But that is a possibility for people who don't have a basement, a garage,
Oh,
or
yeah.
God, you're so lucky to have a shed on the property.
Yeah, that was, I mean, I like literally, I found the previous landowner on Instagram because she's been following the build and commenting and been really excited and supportive. They were going to build their dream home here. And so I think it was a very
Oh,
bittersweet move for them.
you know what
Um,
happened?
um, Politics is what happened. We live in a really liberal state, but if you go, well, the west side is very liberal, the east side is not, and a lot of people did not like how our governor handled COVID, and we had mandates. He was a firefighter, so anyway, they had mandates about vaccinations, and so they decided that they weren't going to stick around. Funny
Okay.
enough, they ended up sticking around, and so they are still in the area, and she's been following along and been super supportive. But I messaged her and was like, that shed has been the best thing that I've ever, that I like, just couldn't have planned for. So that was a big gift.
Yeah. Can you
Oh, and sorry, I didn't answer the other part of your question that I wanted to say. The knowing, 'cause I think this is actually a really important thing. Like knowing, remembering what you have as you're accumulating over like the course of time. So I had a very active Pinterest, board with all the subboards, just to like, even if once I bought something, I would save it to the board. So I visually had everything clustered by rooms, and I would remember what was purchased, like just if I need like a quick visual, like what does that
Yep.
room look like again? What did I commit to? What have I already owned?
Yeah.
Um, and then I also had a,
So you created your own pins because if you were buying things from thrift stores, you were
yes,
just photographing them and
yep,
making a pin.
yep. So that was
Okay.
the other thing too, is I would every once in a while pull things out and clump them in the groupings in the rooms that I thought they would go in, to make sure they all work together. Because,
Yeah.
you're buying one off and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, that's a totally different vibe than this rug that I purchased. So I'd kind of
Yeah.
do like a self audit, about
Okay.
twice a year, I guess, every 6 months. I'd be like, let's pull things out and make sure I'm not going crazy. And then I would take photos and throw that up on my Pinterest board, be like, okay, these are the things I own. And sometimes I would absolutely edit in that process. I would realize, oh, that
Hmm.
that rug didn't wasn't the right move for that one, and I'd move it to a different room or resell it or something like that. So that's how I kind of kept my eyes on things. And then I had then an actual Excel spreadsheet, just line iteming every single thing I could think of, down to like bed
Yep.
sheets and all that. Like I got not just decor, but the actual, if it's going in that room, what is it?
Yes.
And that was, I mean, my brain was tired for 2 years, so.
Oh my God, because I did the exact same thing. That's like basically my process for Cozy Rock with my interior designer, except it's officially one bedroom, right? So
Right.
like when I was thinking about linens, I was thinking about we do have a loft that was slightly different,
Right.
but like I'm thinking about how everything like one couch, one bed,
Yeah.
two beds, like two bedside tables, that's it.
Yeah.
I do not know, then you multiply that by 15 guests and like I just feel overwhelmed thinking about how you managed all of those pieces.
I mean, it's no surprise that I still miscounted. I mean, I triple checked my numbers for linens and mattresses. I thought I bought enough mattresses. We moved in, and I was like, oh, we're missing a twin. Like you look at them so much. We sleep 15, we have 13 beds. That was really important to me. I wanted a space that could fit mixed groups. I'm a
Yeah.
41-year-old woman. I do not want to share a bed on a girls' weekend if I do not have to. And so if I,
That's right.
so if
Or
I,
even a bathroom if I don't have
if I don't
to. I
have
mean,
to,
I
yeah,
will, but
right,
I'm
right.
getting busier in my old age.
Yeah, no, totally. So I just, and 2 weekends ago we had a guys group out here, and I'm like, that's great because they all got to be here and nobody had to share a bed for the most, they didn't have
Right.
to, yeah, they didn't have to share a bed. So anyway, a lot of beds to think about, a lot of sheets, a lot of linens. I still miscounted. I still was rapid, like panic purchasing a twin bed during the move-in week because I was like, oh my God, how did I miss this?
Movie week is so intense. Okay, you said your background is as an event designer, which
Mhm.
is different than an interior designer.
Yeah.
Can you first of all clarify for listeners what the difference is? And then second of all, and I think this is the most important part, is how do you think the fact that you were an event designer changed the way that you approach this cabin?
Yeah. I think an interior designer and event designer have very similar overlap because you are thinking about how a space is being used, flowed, that you flowed through, felt. There's a tactile component to both jobs. The big difference with event design is it's temporary. It's a 24
Mm,
hour, you're building temporary spaces, temporary experiences, which also, and then obviously the event designer is, or sorry, the interior designer is building like lasting spaces.
yeah.
That's probably why I'm not so scared to do crazy things or like bold things with my
Ah,
decor, because when you're building a 24-hour space that lasts for one night, that's supposed to create and evoke a bunch of feelings and emotion, you have the luxury of like picking the weird stuff because it's not
right,
forever. So I think
right.
that is a muscle that I have been able to practice for almost 20 years.
Yeah.
And it can be scary if it's not a practice thing, where you haven't gotten to test your own wild ideas out over and over
Yeah.
again. I have made mistakes in the event design space for sure. There's one that haunts me still where I'm like, oh, what was I thinking? But it was one day and it was over with and I never think about it again. So,
Right. Or you do think about it
oh,
again.
that's true. I do think about it. It does haunt me. I'm like, God, my name was attached to that. But whatever. Nobody else thinks about it.
That's right.
But for me, those like differences aside, that was what I'm so motivated by emotion and feeling. Like I
Mm,
said, that small cabin that inspired a lot of this years ago was that feeling. I'm sitting on a couch with my family, like I want to feel this again.
mhm.
And feeling is, we're so affected by our environment more than we realize. Some people are very acute to it, but like lighting, texture, fabrics, couch depth, like things like that are all part of this feeling, this thing that evokes feeling. And
Yeah.
so when I thought about this place, that's what I was like. I want every moment when they walk into a room, this is kind of like event planning day. The moment they walk to the door, what do they see? What is greeting them? What's
Mhm.
the tone being set? Um,
Mhm.
and so I thought a lot about that front porch, which is very bare right now, but just as like when they open that door, what's the first visual? What's that aha
Yeah.
moment? Um, which we have a really good aha moment. It's very like, huh. It's a good entry. And then they walk in and they're gonna put their boots down. I don't want them just to put their boots anywhere. Like, is there, what's the tray look like? Is there a place for them to sit where to take off their boots? And what does that bench look like? And what does it feel like when they sit on it? So I'm thinking about the actual physical experience, um, and really prioritizing comfort and kind of wonder. And I want,
Yeah.
and that's how we was with events, because you want everybody just to be delighted with every turn. So when they go down the
Yeah.
hallway, you're like,
Like,
oh, what's this? And there are so many other ideas I have that I haven't even implemented yet, but in the cabin. But that was the thought process. I fought so stinking hard again with my builders for this hallway behind a staircase. Wait, nope. So over here,
oh,
if people
yeah.
are watching the video, there's a staircase and then there's a hallway right there. So the original
Oh, yeah.
design, they wanted to put the front door here and you immediately walk into the living room. And I was like,
Yep.
I don't want muddy paw prints. I don't want boots. I don't want
Mm,
jackets. I have kids. I know stuff and I don't want it to
yeah.
happen there.
Here comes the clutter.
Yeah, so I was like, I fought for these little spaces to control chaos and keep these little areas like the living room feeling more sacred and not like another dumping ground. Um,
Yeah. Why does
so
that feel 80s to me?
I
Just
don't know.
seeing when you turned that and I saw the stairway. I don't know why, but that evokes feelings of like
I know.
houses that I saw because I grew up in the 80s. And whereas now we've moved towards like wide open everything. Like
Yeah.
you walk into a cabin and it's just like, hello, here's the entire one great room
Hmm.
versus having those. It feels like now people are buying houses and knocking down all those walls that
Yeah.
were built back in the 70s and
Yeah.
80s.
Yeah. Yeah. We want an open concept, but I also want to control the flow. That
Yeah.
is another kind of event concept is like with the design of the house, you want to shepherd people through an experience. And that was kind of my thought process too with the design and the layout. Is how do I guide them to these moments of delight when they walk in the kitchen?
Yeah.
Oh, when they walk in the dining room. Oh, like I want that over and over again. Oh,
Mhm. Yeah.
it comes
Yeah.
down to a lighting choice, a lamp placement. Yeah.
A couple lamps I'm very fond of, which we'll talk about in a second. But first of all, I just want to know, was it easier? So much of your design work was done for clients. Was it easier or harder to be the client in this case, where you had full control over every decision? Whereas when you work with clients, they give you some parameters that you have to work within.
Oh, I'm my best client.
Okay.
I loved it. I mean, I loved it. If anything, there was like too many ideas to be able to like hone it in, I guess.
Yeah.
Yes and no. I think once I get an idea, I do kind of run. I know how to run with it. But no, it was really, really easy and fun. And I kind of joke. I've had friends ask like, "Oh, would you design or like decorate our place? Or we're gonna get a cabin. Would you do it again?" I'm like, two rules. I was like, I get complete creative control. You can't tell me what to do, and you can't tell me when to stop spending money.
And they're like, okay, oh, it was
I was
great,
like,
but probably
and
not.
then I'm the perfect designer. No, I think I really spoiled myself with, and then again, I have a partner, a husband who does has he knows this is my wheelhouse, and I didn't
Mhm.
run anything by him, which I know is a rare situation. He just knew to trust the, he's like, he knows his weaknesses and his strengths. And he's like,
Yeah.
I can't, I don't even know, Sheena, just make the choices. And I would show him pictures of like, oh, this is how I'm gonna put wood on the ceiling, which he always was like, ooh, is that weird? I'm like, just trust me. But I would try and show him. He had a really hard time visualizing it. I mean, he really can't visualize, so he knew
But
that and
how
just was
nice.
like,
What a gift that he can trust you and then, okay, I'll worry about other stuff, but I don't need to worry about this piece and I know it's going to be amazing.
yeah, yeah.
Okay,
So
let's
that
talk
was
about a
a big
couple of
gift.
specific items.
Yeah.
The Murphy bunk beds. Let's start there.
Everybody
Tell
asks
us
about
more about this.
those.
I've literally never heard of them before.
You know, when you have an idea and you're like, does it exist? And then you Google it. We, again, going back to trying to figure out how many single person beds can we fit in this place, realistically. Our basement we thought it would be great to have bunk beds down there, but we didn't have big enough space to do all the stuff we wanted, while also having like full size beds and whatever. So I simply Googled Murphy bunk bed to see if it existed, and it did. Breda Beds is the company. They it is not a cheap bed. They make it to order. So once you order it, then there's a production. It gets delivered on a pallet. It was the heaviest thing when they delivered it to our house.
Looked it.
They didn't deliver it here. I was like, oh, how are we getting this? So we had to just disassemble the entire packaging and bring it piece by piece up to the mountain, like in a couple carloads. Um, and then installing it was quite a bear. I did a lot of searching and looking at reviews. Um, so we hired a handyman gentleman to do it. He did probably 90% of it by himself. And then it required my dad and me to like, you have to hold the second bunk up for
Yes.
him to like get screwed in. But it took him 2 days, 2 7-hour days to get that thing up because it's made of real wood. Like it is a piece of
And the
furniture.
And design-wise, though, it, like, shockingly goes with the design of the space, which it feels
So
like that was,
lucky.
like, one of my first thoughts besides, like, I didn't even know this existed, but then was like, "Okay, for something that is so rare and you didn't know existed, to then find it in a design that fits the overall house, like, what are the
No.
chances?"
I know. I felt so lucky. I was like, I remember looking at it and being like, oh my gosh. Okay, yes. Like no notes. Perfect. And the end. Yeah, I've
So
gotten
rare.
lucky with, I think all of the bunk beds we have. Feel really fortunate. They feel like they fit the style. I didn't stick with just one manufacturer. I would look specifically for like the style of that room and then put the word bunk bed or put the word bed and see what would
Yeah.
pop up. So
I mean, it's
yeah, the
such a good
bunks.
way for a house like yours with 13 beds to not make it feel like there's no common space. Like all the square footage
Oh
isn't
yeah.
used up just on fitting bedrooms and beds. And so that one just feels so practical.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I think if there's any like faults to this house design, we did make the room small. We did it on purpose. We really wanted to prioritize communal space, because
No
where we're
brainer.
living. Right.
Yeah.
The bedrooms they're tight. It works. Everything fits. Um, but it's, we try out different rooms. We're in a different room this week. And all four of us are in one room right now, just to be like, what does this feel like? Because we want to know what is that guest experience.
Right.
So even though it's a big empty house right now, all four of us have been sharing one room for the last 2 nights. And because you want to hear how the bed squeaks. Like I want to know how that bunk bed, is that a quiet bunk bed or is it a squeaky bunk bed in the night? And like if somebody moves in the master, in the king bed, is it like I just want to know all the sounds. And so we're doing that, and I'm like, oh, this room feels a little tight.
I
But
feel like you're taking quality control to the next level.
I want to, yeah, I have one room left that we haven't slept in, which I feel like is going to be the easiest of the rooms.
Okay. Have you slept in the room with 3 twin beds in it?
That's the one we haven't done yet.
Okay.
It's the
I
log
love
cabin
that one.
room. It's so
Yes, the
cute.
way okay, it has, like, log walls, but then it also has those single lights, and maybe it's just this image that was taken, let me see who took it, maybe you took it, but of the 3 girls who look like to be, like, 8 years old
That was a guest
sleeping
photo.
oh my god, it's
They
so
sent that to us.
good.
Isn't it adorable? And they
They're
were our
all
first.
reading books.
They was our first guests, and we know them. They're loose acquaintances, so not super close,
Yeah,
but close enough where she like
yeah.
sent me a photo. And I was like, "Can I repost this?" I was like, "This is literally this was the dream. Like I was like,
Right.
I'm like, oh, I'm gonna cry. I'm
Right.
like, oh my God, it's happening.
So good. I love that room. Okay,
Yeah.
the other item I want to ask about is in your kitchen. You have those beautiful green lights, and we have some very
Mhm.
similar to that at our camp in Maine, but that's not what I want to ask about. Yes. Okay. Now, on your view, I don't, okay, on my view, all the way to the left is a very colorful, lower profile ceiling light. Where did
That
you
one.
get that one? Yes.
It's a vintage stained
Looks
glass,
good.
yeah, flush mount, from a lighting store in, I want to say Indiana. I think I found them
So
on
good.
Etsy. I went down this, I'm really obsessed with stained glass. And I really thought it'd be cool. Originally, it was going to be the entryway thing. I want it to be a statement piece. I wanted you to walk in and be like,
Yeah.
whoa, like I wanted something like that.
Yeah.
Um, where it landed is where it belongs. So I'm glad it worked out. But yeah, that one was kind of an investment. That one was like that was a more expensive light fixture, but I was like, I have to have it. And again, that
Yeah.
goes back to, I bought that 2.5 years ago. That light was purchased maybe when this place was dirt. I did not know where it was going to go. I didn't know. I knew we were going to have a green couch. That's all I knew about this house. There's a green couch and there'd be wood on the walls. And that's all I knew. And I saw that light and I was like, something is getting designed around this, like this
We will
thing.
find a way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when I was shopping for these pendant lights above the counter, everything anchored. That was my North Star. That stained glass light was my North Star for the entire kitchen. Does it tie back to that light?
Yeah.
Does it all make sense? Because that thing's not moving. That thing is in this kitchen. So
Right.
everything else has to like play nice with it.
And I honestly think that's the best piece of advice for people who are trying to do this themselves that my interior designer gave me like way back in like episode 2 or 3 of the podcast. We talked to Jordan, who did the entire
Yeah.
interior design for Cozy
I
Rock.
love her
And
place.
that was her advice was like, you have to find one thing that you love that you are not getting rid of no matter what, and then design around that. Because you can't
Yes.
have 3 things you love in one room if they don't all go together. And so you might end up with a couple things you love that happen to go together, but it has to start with one. And that's really
Yeah.
helped me, who has very little cohesive design sense, is like, okay,
Mhm.
is it the rug? And so maybe before I do anything else, just find something that will
Yep.
give me inspiration for that
Yep.
room. And then I can hold everything else up against that and does that work.
Yep. I did that with our living room. I knew I wanted a green couch no matter what, and I knew I wanted a red rug. And I didn't buy anything until those two pieces were secured because I knew everything else was had to work around them. So there was some pretty like really, I mean, the log cabin room actually wasn't going to be a log cabin room. That was a panic purchase.
The
The week
side
we
in for
moved
the
in.
wall.
Yeah, I was gonna do, this sounds so insane. It is insane. I don't know what I was thinking. I was gonna do a giant paint by number mural on the
Oh my.
wall. I had it planned for a year. I had a whole plan. I had all the
Who
paints. I
even
still have
puts
all the
that
paint.
up on the wall?
You
Like the paint,
project
like
it.
you have,
So I projected everything on a wall. I drew out the entire thing. I think I got through three. I put it into quadrants. I got to three quadrants. And I remember being like, on what planet do I feel like this is gonna get done? It's like I have to, if I got six friends just to focus on one quadrant, it would still take us 2 weeks to finish this thing. I was like, no way. And we were up, like we really wanted to get this place launched. Like we moved in and we launched probably a month later than we wanted to. And so it was just, there was that pressure of time of like, we would like to start making revenue and capitalize on the popular month before we enter a shoulder season out
right,
here.
right.
So I
I
remember
know that feeling.
just staring at that wall and being like, hard pivot. So that was interesting because the whole room was designed. Everything I purchased was for that
Oh,
mural. That never happened. Um, so I was like, you know what? Log cabin. I bet a log cabin. I was Googling wallpapers, everything. And so I found the log cabin peel and stick wallpaper, slapped that up, never wallpapered in my life.
wait, that's
Um,
wallpaper?
it's a wallpaper. Yeah. It's a
I
peel
need
and
to look
stick.
more closely at these photos because that one with the guests in it, it just looked, it was darker. So it looked like real
No, it's
log
wallpaper.
cabin.
Yeah.
Okay, now I'm scrolling through your photos to find one. Okay,
So yeah.
I want to move to social media
Yeah.
because you have experience in this and you actually manage social media accounts for businesses now. Which came
Mhm.
first? Did you create this social media account and then that got you experience, or had you been managing them for a while?
What started was because of my thrifting business. I was thrifting and then reselling on Instagram for about 2 years and built that account really. it's probably one of my most successful accounts I've ever created, just in terms of like the growth that I had in
Do
the
you want to
time that I
share it with
did.
people so that we can look at it?
It's called Uncluttered Curio. I haven't touched it
Okay,
in
I
3 years,
love it.
but it still exists.
I love it.
um, and Uncluttered Curio, and
Curio is with a C or a K.
Curio.
Okay,
And
found it.
I grew that. I mean, it's only 2,000 followers. Like in the grand scheme of things, there's bigger accounts out there. I mean, I stopped, but I got to 2,000 pretty fast, which to me was like very exciting. And then I ended up, because of that, one of my friends' clients has a store. She, in Washington State, everything shut down. We couldn't get into storefronts for like 3 months. It was really, really COVID conservative out here. And so she was like, I wish she would just do our Instagram. And I was like, I have nothing else to do. Let's do that. So
Yeah,
I just started doing store tours and helping keep her business afloat. And then through that, organically, other businesses came. So for 2.5 years, I managed I did 8 small businesses I did the social media accounts for. And then I closed up shop with Uncluttered Curio because that, um, was more of a hobby and like a fun thing,
yeah,
and the other one was an actual like career. Back in October, I did that back in October of last year. I did actually say goodbye to most of my clients to pursue actually teaching people how to capture content more successfully and comfortably, speaking to the Gen X, the boomer generation, people
yep,
that feel outpaced, feel too old, not relevant. It's like, I think that's all just lies we tell ourselves because what we're seeing is reinforcing that narrative, but I don't
yeah.
think it has to be the truth. Um,
Oh, let's talk about
and
this because I feel like that's what I hear from a lot of folks. There's a mix, right? There's some people in their 20s who are building cabins, and like part of how they can afford to do it is they've grown a big social media account or whatever. Like I think
yeah,
there's a mix, but I think there's plenty of people who are just building their dream cabin in their 40s or whatever, or even
yeah,
older, and have no idea how to tackle the social media side of it and don't know if it's necessary. Do I have to do this? Do I not have to do this? And if I have to do it, then what does that look like? What would you tell
right,
them?
yeah. I think there's two, and is there a bit of a lag? Can you hear me okay? Okay,
Yeah, you're freezing, but I can
it
hear you.
glitched
I
for a
think there's a
second.
little bit of a
I
pause. We
wanted to
can
make
clean that
sure.
up in editing now.
Okay, I'll just keep talking unless it gets disconnected. um, so I think there's 2 ways to approach social media, and it's deciding what you want from it. Do I just want to, I say this to any business of any kind. It could be a short-term rental, you could be an orthodontist, I don't care. Are you doing it just because you want to have a presence? You want to feel, actually, let me back up. I think if you have a business and you're not on social media, I think that's a bad move. I think it's just a really bad move. I know
Yeah.
with short-term rentals, we have Airbnb and we have different ways and platforms to get our names, our listings out there. But our demographic, the people that are renting our places are getting younger and younger and younger, and they are searching hashtags and they are going to social media and they are chasing a vibe. They're chasing feelings. And if they can see a place that are like, oh, I want to see that place. Like, oh my God, look at that fireplace. Look at that, whatever. That's what's gonna, I believe, that's how I shop, draw them to that place. So I think to just ignore it completely isn't smart, but how you want to engage with it, I think you can take 2 different paths. And I think the path that most people probably want to do and feels comfortable and I think is great is just like, I just want to be on here and I want to remain relevant and present and have a place where people can find me. But this is not my focus. It's not where I'm driving revenue. I don't care. Like, I want to be seen and I want to play the game that needs to be played in this marketing era. And then the
Yep.
other path is I want to treat this super serious. I'm going to have an aggressive plan. I'm going to pump out content on a higher pace and I'm going to really like see if this can drive more revenue or collaborations. I mean, I've listened to some different podcast episodes of yours of people, being able to do collaborations or partnerships or
Hmm.
brand deals. Like there's a different path, but I think most people are in the camp of like, I just want to be relevant and not like loathe this thing and like hate it. Everybody seems to hate it and be resentful. And that resentment, I think, comes from us seeing a lot of really beautiful accounts or beautiful places or good edits or beautiful photos or young people. And it's like, well, my photos never look like that, or I don't look like
Yeah.
that, or my place doesn't look like that. And
Yeah.
so it's this self doubt that keeps creeping in. And I
Yeah.
want to tell people who are letting the aesthetics of these accounts influence their feeling of relevancy and their feeling of like validity, to say that that is a shallow pool that does not hold much weight.
Mm,
People, there is a pendulum swing that we had for a while where the aesthetic feed ruled the day. Everybody wanted
mhm,
this very curated aesthetic feed. Um, TikTok, love it or hate it,
mhm,
what I am thankful for about TikTok is that it is retraining the consumer and the viewer to be comfortable, cool, and actually trust more raw, unedited, unpolished content.
mhm.
And a video, any reel I did on Instagram for any of my clients, the less produced and the more off the cuff, we got more views than the stuff that I
Yeah.
spent hours editing every
Yeah.
freaking time.
Yep.
And I'm still learning that lesson. There's a reel right now that I want to put together. It's going to take me too much time, and it may only get 300 hits, but
Yeah.
I'm still going to do it. And then there's a reel of me literally posting some footage. It was a recent one. I filmed something and I forgot what I filmed it for. I was watching the video and I was like, what was the storyline? Like, I don't even know what this video was about. And so I was like, well, content's content. So I just posted it and did a voiceover. It was like, I don't know what this was for. And I was like, can you guys get what this is about? And like, it was just like nonsensical. And that got, 3 times more views than like my more polished one. And I think people trust rawness and authenticity because they see themselves in each other. If someone is a little bit sloppy or like no makeup on or in real life clothes doing real life things, it feels like we can connect with them. And so like don't be afraid to not be polished. And like that's my soapbox.
Yeah. How would you, what would be like some really practical, like, okay, let's say I have an Instagram account and all I've done so far is post like 10, 15 photos of the place.
Yeah.
I haven't even touched reels. I don't even know how to put my face on the camera. How would you help them feel more confident starting to inject a bit of their personality into their Instagram? Or is that not necessary? Because I think that's a barrier for a lot of people. They're like, well, if I have to put my face on camera, I'm not doing this. What would you tell them? Where should they start?
Yeah. So two things. I have for $20 on Amazon, there is a tripod that's made just for a phone. I own like 3 of them. I have one in my car, I have one here at the cabin, I have one at my house. Um, my favorite thing to do, because when I get in the zone, when I'm at the cabin, I'm working on a project or I'm doing something, I might forget to actually film it or film something. Like, we are running a business. Like that is that is what we're trying to
Right.
do. And so I will put my phone up and I will run raw video. I will just film myself doing projects around the house. I'm not talking to the camera. There's literally no script involved. I'm just capturing stuff. And what happens from that, it gets a person on a screen. So if that's a way to get more comfortable with the idea of being on camera and not doing a talking face thing, which by the way, talking face videos are not actually that successful. Faces and bodies are successful and voiceovers are, but me just staring at the camera being like, let me give you a tour of this thing, actually don't
Right.
do as well. So take
Right.
that pressure off. You don't have to be you don't have to be interviewed on your own Instagram. But I film stuff and I just call it B-roll footage. And then what I'll do is I'll immediately go and take that video and I might just save clips that I think might be interesting in terms of like, or maybe
Mm,
not interesting. Maybe I was sweeping the house or doing a vacuum. Maybe I was just yesterday we hung American flag banners on our railing. So I just filmed us hanging the banners, being like, I don't know, this could be something.
yeah.
Get comfortable just like maybe recording the nothingness and the mundane. People, again, it feels raw, it feels interesting, it feels real. Like, oh, it's a real person taking care of their home, and like I want to watch them do that. And then what you can do with those is then you can use them as like one video could give you 10 different reels where you could
Yes.
just have it attached to some music. You could have some copy. You could have no copy. You could just have a caption. Something one of your interviews, which I loved so much, Northwest Haven, they're up in the North
Hmm.
Cascades. And
Hmm.
she says the 3 E's, right? Emotion, education, or entertainment. And so
Yeah.
I think if you're okay with just filming, letting your camera just run, um, you might get entertainment out of it. For example, I filmed myself opening mattresses in our master bedroom when we moved in, just thinking, oh, I'll just do a progress video. It
Yeah.
was one of those mattresses that explodes. Like I cut it wrong
Yep.
and
Yep.
it thing went and I fell back. I was under the mattress. I was cackling. I was by myself. No one was here. And that was hysterical. Like, it was so funny. I couldn't plan that. And
Right.
so, this B-roll turned into entertainment. It could have
Right.
also been super boring and I could have deleted it and been like, no one needs to see that.
Yeah. Okay, so these are like really concrete, like having the tripod, like things like that, film B-roll, use that for different stuff. When you zoom out, when you first started this account, since you had some experience, what about your overall cohesive strategy? Did you have a thought on like, what do I want my account to be? Who do I want it to be for? And how do I make sure that every piece of content that I'm making, and maybe that's too much for someone new
No.
to even think about, but I'm curious what your approach was of like, okay, how do I want my space to fit into this weird world of cabin porn? And what
Yeah.
do I want to be different about it? What am I offering people that they don't have in other places?
Well, I mentioned earlier, like I'm a big fan of, comedy and kitschiness and, that kind of plays into me choosing the 80s and things like that. So
Mhm.
I wanted my little spot on the internet to feel like a place of like levity and play and also behind the scenes. Because I'm also thinking about what accounts like grab my attention? What am I just
Mhm.
like loving? I love pretty photos, but eventually it becomes kind of white noise.
Yes.
I watching someone unpack a couch sounds stupid, but for some reason, think of all the things we get lost in. We get lost in
Mm,
people stirring cake batter and pouring it into a pan and putting it in the
right.
oven. Such a mundane task. So
Right.
I'm thinking, okay, if that stuff is capturing my attention, and I also like to have fun. I like making jokey reels. I decided my place was going to be a combination. My strategy was humor, being willing to just do like dumb videos every now and then because I want people to find my place entertaining. Like maybe they come back because they just want to see what next reel we're going to do. I
Yeah.
want it to be behind the scenes where it's like it is a unique process to watch someone do a complete new build from start to finish and watch them decorate it and then also film the whole thing. Like it's not there's not a lot of that. I want to make sure can you still hear me okay? Yeah. Um, so I wanted it to be a place where people got to see like the nitty gritty. Lots of unboxings, lots of garbage runs.
Yep.
Nothing was boring. In my mind, I was like, none of this is boring because I watch this stuff for some reason. So someone else will watch this.
Right.
And the videos, I've had many
Right.
people message me, um, or maybe just on Insta story. Maybe I'm not making reels. Maybe I'm just Insta storying it. And people would message me being like, I live for your cabin trips up to the mountains. And I'm like, well, it's just a shell of a house or something to look at. But something about it is like,
Yes.
what's next? What are we going to see? And then the
Right.
other piece is then the vibe, the inner, like the feeling, that whole like thing from the start is like this morning I did some antiquing yesterday. The most recent photo on my feed right now is a pile of stuff on our dining table. Cause I was in the kitchen. I look up, the light's coming through. It's hitting this pile of stuff. And I'm like, oh, and you see like the American flags like blowing in the wind in the background. I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
I just like that gave me a feeling. So if something gives me a physical reaction, much like in the shopping, if a moment captures my attention while I'm here, I will take a picture of it. Even if I never use it, I want to like, I want to utilize, I want to see if I could use it. And a lot of those feelings are like that's the other piece of the pie. So it's a rotation of that. It's a mix of the humor, the feeling, and then the behind the scenes, which is sort of educational, but like peek behind the curtain.
Yeah, people want that because I do think we're starting to get desensitized by the curation of only beautiful content. I think we're starting to realize the damage it's doing to our own like mental health. And we're
Yeah,
starting to say, like, actually, I don't want that anymore. And
yeah,
maybe I'll start following it initially, but when that's all I see, like, I'm
yeah,
going to stop following it or I'm going to stop
yeah,
paying attention to it. And to your point, it
yep.
becomes like white noise.
If
Okay.
you can, my
Go
last
ahead.
thought on that was like, if you can humanize your space, so you have an inanimate object, you have an empty vessel, it is, it's not a breathing thing. So if you can humanize it by attaching you or people, whatever it is, to it, but especially if you're willing to be a part of your own feed and get in front of the camera in some way, people start rooting for you. Like, yes, they love the place, but then they're starting to feel, even if they'll never meet them, you're like, God, I want them to succeed. Like they want to cheer you
Yeah.
on. And then that results in reshares and posts or wish lists. Like,
Hmm.
oh, I want to go there someday. Like you just don't know what that might or again, collaborations, partnerships, interviews,
Right.
podcasts. Like you
Right.
don't know what happens and you have to I think humanizing your space is a really smart move if you want to be on
Yep.
social media.
I will be honest, there are cabins that I've interacted with on messages for years and I've gotten messages from them, but I have no idea who the human is. So I couldn't even tell you the name of the cabin. Like I just don't remember
Yeah,
them. And it's not on purpose and it's not malicious. It's
right.
just I will never form a human connection with a
Yeah,
physical space that I've never been and I might not ever go to. But the
correct.
people who messaged me and like sign off their name and have like human interactions and on their account they show up, then I'm responding to their stories where I see them. I am making a human connection. I'm building a human relationship and I know their names. I mean, plenty of them I've now met in real life since
Yeah.
then, because you're actually, it's real. It's not just on social media.
It's social media. We're supposed to
Right.
socialize, like we're supposed to
Right.
engage. And the DMs are one of the most powerful places you can be.
That's right.
That is huge. After our interview, I know I was gonna like, I'm gonna go and find all the Northwest cabins that you've possibly interviewed. I've already reached out to Northwest Haven. Her and I have already chit-chatting. We're gonna get
Yeah.
together and gush about each other's places. You know, I'm not reaching out to her because I want her to rent my cabin. That's not the point. The point is the
Right.
community,
Right.
the connection is so powerful. We're powerful in
Right.
numbers, and opportunities happen when you're part of a community. And so for
That's
me,
right.
the DMs are so, if you treat it like a long game and create it a place of connection, not a place of like direct sales, like if
Yes.
this person isn't a buying customer, I'm not interested. Um, I think you're going to see more fruit.
Yeah. And I also think the other benefit that I've seen, and people have called me out on this a little bit when I talk about how great our guests are. I've had people message me and be like, yeah, but your guests are different. And I've spent a lot of time thinking about that of like, why are our guests different?
Yeah.
And one, I don't know that they are. I think 99.9% of all guests are like good people who want to take care of your space. But
Yeah.
I do think there's something to the fact that I've put my face on camera for the last 4 years and have shown up there through the build and through hosting. And so by the
Yep.
time that people eventually stay there, they know whose cabin it is. I want it to feel like their cabin when they're there, but they take extra good care of it because they know the human that they are impacting if they leave a
Yeah.
mess or
Yes.
do damage to it. And
Absolutely.
I think if our guests are different, which I don't know that I agree with. I think that is the piece that might make it different. So it's yet another
Yeah.
advantage of building community with other hosts, but also community with your past guests and having a
Yeah.
human relationship with them and not just a transactional relationship with them. I
Oh
love
no.
your space. It was so great hearing a little bit more
Okay, there
of
we
the
go.
intentionality behind it. And I'm excited for other folks to check it out and
Thank
see
you.
something a little bit different amidst a cabin world where a lot of them are all, I mean, cabin culture is a thing for a reason. So I know why a lot of them have similar attributes, but I just freaking love that yours immediately stands out from a lot of cabins I've seen. So thank you for taking the time with me.
Thank you. I'm really proud of it. Oh, thank you for the interview.
Thanks so much for joining us. And if you liked what you heard, feel free to leave us a 5-star rating on Spotify or share some of your favorite parts over on Apple Podcast. If you have feedback or suggestions for the future, you can also find me on Instagram at Cozy Rock Cabin. Looking forward to next week.